Okay, so welcome everybody. We're going to talk about one of my most favorite topics today, and that is how environmental toxins play into our health. I'm Christina Santini, and I'm a clinical nutritionist with a background in human nutrition and biological medicine. And I've been practicing nutrition and clinical lab testing for the last 15 years, both in Los Angeles, New York, and Copenhagen for medical doctors. And I also have my own private practice. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And what I realized is just that I would say the last couple of decades, we've seen an incredible increase in chronic diseases, and our way of treating them is very poor. That's kind of why they're called chronic. But when you look into the research, then we see that a lot of these chronic diseases are actually tied to various types of toxics and the chemicals in our everyday life. And that means that these days we're actually able to test for it, and that is a game changer, because if we can begin to test for the type of toxins that can be connected to various types of chronic diseases, then we can treat them. So this has really been my focus I would say the last decade, and it's been a huge game changer in how I am able to help patients and also help myself, because we're all exposed to these environmental toxins. And if we can focus on the piece of the puzzle that's going to make the biggest difference in our overall health, that's going to make a big difference. So let me just get started with the presentation. And hang on a second. So at my clinic, I do consultations, I do lab testing. I also do something called medical thermography, where you scan the body and look at inflammation in the body. And I work cross-disciplinary with specialized doctors that I send some of my scans and lab work to, because I like to practice what I'm best at and have other people do what they're great at. So just a heads up to those of you who are joining right now, the house rules of this webinar is, please have all your questions placed in the Q&A box, and use the chat box only if you want to share something. I'll be looking at the Q&A box to answer questions at the end of this seminar. So that's it. I want you to think about some symptoms that you might be struggling with at the moment, because I think almost everyone has, or at least know someone who has some of these kind of chronic symptoms. I myself suddenly had migraines that were absolutely debilitating from one day to another. It almost felt like that. I would, for those of you who have migraines, I feel so bad for you, because I thought I was going to die. I've never had a headache my entire life, not even a headache. And then suddenly I had these debilitating migraines where I would just be light sensitive. It felt like knives were shooting through my brain, and I would just vomit uncontrollably for 3 days in a row. And it was just a nightmare. I mean, I was working, and I've been working for myself for the last couple of years, so I can't really call in sick. And I also thought it was kind of weird to be a health practitioner and call in sick. I mean, we're all human, I get that, but I just felt like this is just really a bad thing. So that kind of also spurred me into figuring out what is causing these migraines. And it turned out to be a mold issue. It turned out to be mycotoxins. So I just thought that was like so fascinating. I got rid of the mold and my migraines went away. Now, this is not something that happened from one day to the next. This was a process because I was working. Meanwhile, I was treating myself. So it took, I would say it got much better within the first 6 months. but it took 1 year to fully disappear, to never have a migraine again. But I just think that is amazing if we can figure out what might be causing our symptom instead of just popping a pill for a headache or being on chronic migraine medication, or even something like digestive disorders. Almost everyone these days are dealing with digestive disorders, and very few of us actually think about this might be caused by toxicity. I'll say regardless of whether we're coming from a background in conventional medicine or nutrition or biological medicine, we are only as good as the questions we ask. And if we don't understand how to go upstream with our clients, and what do I mean by upstream? If we don't understand how to keep asking questions until we get to the contributing cause, the main cause of their issues, then we are symptom treating. So a lot of these restrictive diets going on at the moment, where people will say that they feel better, but only when they're on them, and they're so almost addicted to these very limiting diets, because basically it's symptom management. They cannot eat a slice of cake because then they bloat and everything just goes haywire in the digestive system. And I think most of us can agree that that's not really what I would describe as being a quality life. I don't think being like very strict or having to follow all these rules around food just to keep symptoms at bay is reflecting that effortless sense of well-being and thriving in the body we're in, and basically feeling like we're living in a body where things are kind of feeling luxurious. It doesn't feel very luxurious to have to say no to everything at a dinner party. It feels boring, it feels restrictive, and it's also kind of boring to be married to someone who's like super strict about everything they eat. Like life is short and you want to have your champagne, you want to have your cake, but you don't want to feel sick afterwards. And that's where most of us get stuck, because we cannot tolerate a lot. So again, instead of treating the digestion, which is absolutely important, but we need to go upstream and ask the question, what is causing our digestion to be malfunctioning? What is causing our gut bacteria to be aggressive? Instead of just being comfortable with, okay, we have some bad gut bacteria, so I'm just going to take some probiotics. And the minute we stop the probiotics, then the symptoms come back. That is the essence of symptom management. And we can do that both with natural medicine and we can do it with conventional medicine. But we don't want to, I mean, symptom management is still important, but we don't want to get stuck in that, because otherwise, well, we get stuck in it. Other things I just want to mention when you're looking at this list is also things like we have all these hormone disrupting substances that's linked to infertility issues, and a lot of toxins play into that. We have skin issues like eczema and psoriasis. Why are we not asking what is causing this? We need to be curious and we need to ask the why. And also men's health issues. I mean, all of these fake hormones, xenoestrogens that we have in our environment today, that's a disaster for men's health. You're seeing that men are getting male boobs. You don't see it as obvious in women because, I mean, you're not going to notice if a woman has a triple D cup, but we are seeing women getting bigger and bigger boobs, and it's not completely healthy because it's actually related to these hormone mimicking substances in our environment, and it does increase the risk also of breast cancer and stuff like erectile dysfunction. Most wouldn't think about that actually toxins play into this, can play into this. Not saying that it's always a cause, but a lot of these things, we need to ask the question, is there toxicity involved? Because toxins are going to cause the body to break down, and no amount of healthy eating or exercise can override toxicity. That needs to be removed. And a lot of these contributors in modern society today are, I would almost say, silent or sneaky. It's like we don't notice it. We might notice if we're very health nutty conscious, be like, I'm not going to eat gluten, or I'm not going to eat the burger. I'm going to go for something else. But what we don't realize is that if we have some of the silent sources of toxicity in our life, that is far worse than eating a burger or a gluten-rich slice of cake, which gets metabolized and then it's out of the system and it's burnt off, unless we have celiac disease. But that's really what we want to look into. So think about issues that you might be struggling with at the moment, and then maybe just reflect at some of the sources today we're going to go through of major health threats in our life today. I also just want to show you this. I think it's just, well, I won't say fascinating because it's almost a little bit tragic. Rather, you're seeing this catastrophic increase since the 1990s of all of these chronic issues. But what does that tell us? It tells us that this is not about genes, because the genes are the same. It's not like we suddenly got a burst of sick genes since the 1990s. So the reasoning that, well, I'm sick because of my genes, that is really, I don't want to swear, that's really BS. But we want to focus on what's activating those genes. And that is why some of the same toxins can cause very different symptoms. I mean, you're looking at very different diseases here on the list, everything from Alzheimer's to depression, diabetes. And I also want to just mention about diabetes, because many people don't think about a toxin like mercury that impacts our blood sugar. Also heavy metals can also impact your blood pressure. So instead of just accepting that, okay, my dad also had elevated blood pressure, or we had diabetes in the family, it might not be about the genes. The genes tell us kind of what we're going to develop, but the trigger needs to be there. And it's really not that interesting to test for genes, because we all have genes of genes of disease, each one of us. Maybe it's for addiction, maybe it's for diabetes, maybe it's for a gene for something else, Alzheimer's, but it doesn't mean that we're going to develop that disease. Genes are not our destiny. Less than 5% of disease is related to genes. This is really important, because I know some people can get a little bit triggered when we talk about taking back control of our health. I guess I don't quite understand it, because I've always liked to believe that I have a say in my destiny and I can change it. But I can also understand that it's like, well, if you have stage 4 cancer and you just get told that just change this and then you shouldn't have it, things are not that simple. But I will say that understanding what is causing a kind of load, health load, a toxic load on our body, that is empowering, because we can change it, maybe even before disease happens. So that's how I would view it. I mean, take some of the tools that you can use that we're going to go through today, and then think about if something is relevant for you, or maybe even better, get tested, and then you know what is the issue. Also to get back to be able to living a normal life, eating chocolate cake, drinking that glass of wine with your dinner, having that quality life that we all want, without being destined to eat bland food and bananas for the rest of our life. Nothing wrong with a banana, but I mean, we want a little bit more variety. This is kind of to just sum it up. Obviously, I'm only going to go through the environmental toxicity issues today. But when we're looking at what is causing a complete breakdown health-wise, then there's got to be a lot of pieces of the puzzle present before the body kind of begins to break down. It's never just going to be one thing. So obviously we have the genetic predispositions in the pot. This is kind of called the pot boiling over. And those are genes. And again, I wouldn't pay too much attention to that, but that's going to decide kind of which direction we're going to go in if we get the toxins needed to activate those genes. Then we have some nutritional deficiencies. Unfortunately, the soil today is severely deficient in a variety of nutrients, especially minerals. And it means that I would say everybody today is malnourished and mineral deficient. And that is very unfortunate because a lot of the minerals actually play into toxicity. That means that the more minerals we're lacking, the more we're at risk for attracting various types of toxins in our body, because a lot of the minerals, something like silica, which everyone I test is deficient in silica, and this is the precursor of collagen, bone formation, hair, especially important for bones, but also more interesting for vanity issues and women, is that it helps to boost collagen. I'm not that big of a fan of collagen. I think it's okay, but I think it's more important to look at what is collagen built by and what is it that we're actually lacking to build it. Because just because we're eating a collagen product, which is very popular today, it doesn't mean that it's going to go to our skin. And if we're mainly lacking silica, which is what I'm seeing when I'm testing people, then that is really the building block we should be focusing on to get more collagen produced rather than kind of eating the whole bucket. But what I wanted to say with silica is that it helps to push out stuff like aluminum. And aluminum is also something that I see that everybody is moderately toxic in today because it's everywhere. Deodorants, these non-stick pans with Teflon, it's in a variety of various types of medication, and especially if you're taking painkillers every day, which is not recommended. So you're not supposed to do it, but it can be pretty high in some of those things, along with just being in abundance in our environment, unfortunately. But I would say if you want to get aluminum, minimize the sources of that in your environment, I would really focus in on avoiding aluminum in your deodorant. So get a aluminum-free deodorant, and then don't use the non-stick pans, because every time you cook, you're going to coat it in aluminum. And that's really, really ridiculous. I would say I would much rather eat a burger, and a burger can be totally healthy. I mean, it's just, is it grass-fed meat? Is it good quality? But case aside, then I would eat healthy food, but made in this non-stick pan, because you're coating the food every time with aluminum. And that's really toxic. And it adds up. I mean, it's not just doing it once or twice or a week when you're away, but it's like the small daily habits that we don't notice that we do every day, year after year. So those are kind of two small things that we can change, and it's not painful. So I'm a big proponent of changing things that are not painful for our daily sense of luxurious living. So nutrient deficiency is a big one, unfortunately, and D vitamin is also people are widely deficient in that, along with B vitamins, and iodine is something I see as well. Magnesium, yeah, silica is a big one. And then on top of that comes, we might have some sensitivities. Like if you do a food allergy test, you're going to see that, I'll say most people I test for that, they're going to rate high in casein and wheat. Those substances are just difficult to digest. It doesn't mean that you have to be completely hysterical about cutting it out, but it does mean that you don't want to drink milk and eat Wonder Bread all day. And no one should do that anyway, so it's not really that big of a deal. But I mean, especially in Europe, we can be big, both milk drinkers and bread eaters. And there's nothing wrong with it in moderation. And there's nothing wrong with it if we don't have a gut issue, but it's all about the dosage. So you want to downplay the things that you're a little bit sensitive to. It might be something else in your case. Maybe it shows that you're a little bit sensitive to peanuts or certain nuts. We want to avoid that a little bit. But if we're seeing more than, I would say, a couple of foods showing up on this food allergy testing that many people like to get done, then we have to keep in mind that we're probably not really sensitive per se to this. It has more to do with our gut is completely damaged, and then we are reacting hypersensitive to just about anything that goes into the gut. Now, how would you treat that? Again, you would treat the gut. Why is the gut damaged? So you can begin to eat normally again. So food allergy testing is not going to be kind of a way to understand how to treat yourself in itself. But on top of that, then oftentimes we might get an infection before we get the pot boiling over. It could be Lyme's disease. It could be Epstein-Barr, which most of us are carriers of, Epstein-Barr virus, or some other type of infection that attacks our immune system. Then we might have some hormonal imbalance issue, maybe due to stress, or maybe due to some of these hormone mimicking substances that are in our environmental toxins today. So those are kind of connected, environmental toxins and hormonal imbalance, because the environmental toxins can cause the hormonal imbalance, or you could already have maybe adrenal fatigue, which is a complete burnout of the body's ability to handle stress and produce cortisol in appropriate amounts. So we get the toxicity, which is kind of really almost the tip of the iceberg, the big thing that enables this from going from bad to absolutely disaster. Typically what we see here is, before people get sick, it's typically some type of psychosocial factor which triggers this whole thing. And I'll say this last year is a very good example of that, because people have been getting divorced like never before. And usually following a divorce, a lot of people begin to struggle with their health, because it's like they get completely attacked with stress hormones, and this just makes their immune system super weak. So everything else that's been going on beneath now has completely free pass to just attack the body. So I would say rarely is stress the cause, but I would more say it's typically the trigger. And sometimes we confuse that because we get the symptoms, and maybe this is right after or divorce, or somebody we love died, or something awful happened, and we thought that caused it. But I'll say usually it's a trigger. So we still had a lot of other issues going on beneath that. Doesn't make it better, but it's just about understanding how this all plays into each other. But the environmental toxins is really kind of the connecting dot, which makes the pot completely ready to boil over when any stressful event in our life happens. We're going to talk about 6 major toxic health threats today. And of course, there are other things, but I'm going to talk about the environmental toxins. So I'm not going to talk about if you're drinking Diet Coke all day, or if you're rolling around in sugar or stuff like that. That just should be pretty common sense for all of us, that that's not a highway to health. On the contrary. So number 1, I know some of you are like, you have got to be kidding me. I did not sign into this webinar to hear that I'm not supposed to be smoking. I already know that. And I know, but I just had to say it because what's interesting that some people don't know is that it completely inactivates the body to detoxify. So if you're smoking, and of course there's probably a border to this, that's not quite clear. I haven't been able to see it, but I would say logically, if you're probably smoking 1 cigarette a week, that's probably not a major issue here. But the daily consumption of cigarettes hopefully you're not chewing them, consumption, inhaling them, that is going to inactivate a gene called MTHFR. And that is a gene responsible for detoxifying our body. So why am I saying this? Because it's important that we understand what our weakest link is. And if our weakest link is we're smoking, we shouldn't be focusing on all the other factors because they're not going to move the needle in response to improving our health that much. But typically, because we have this addictive personality, it could also be maybe we have this thing that we eat clean all day and then we binge big time on Ben & Jerry's or Haagen-Dazs or whatever at night. Then we're like, well, I'm not going to focus on the binging at night, but I'm going to focus on eating super clean all day. But it doesn't really matter because we cancel it out by our weakest spot. And that could be either smoking, or it could be binging at night, or it could be something completely different. But we should begin to understand that even though it hurts sometimes to change our weakest point in life, that is where the change really happens. It's not kind of eating gluten-free all day, not even eating one slice of bread, and then we go completely nuts at the end of the day. That's like, it doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't make any difference to our health. What would make a difference is if we didn't binge at night, and then we could have a slice of cake during the day, or if we didn't smoke all day, then we could begin to detoxify our body instead of just thinking we can cancel it out by drinking, I don't know, green juice or doing all the other steps I'm going to go through right now. I also wanted to show you this because this is just showing how these toxins from cigarettes accumulate in the body. We're talking about stuff like arsenic, barium, cadmium, and also mercury, but also say this client also had mercury dental fillings. So it's not just the mercury from the cigarette showing up here, but this is several decades after he stopped smoking, and they're still in the body because they stay in the body if you don't do something specifically targeted to get it out of your body. And that's what many people don't realize. They think, oh, I just stopped this bad habit of mine, or I stopped this source of toxicity, but it's still in your body. The half-life is incredibly slow. Number 2 is major health threat is our water. And we have to think in terms about toxins of how much we consume of something, because that is really what makes the difference. It's not whether we eat, again, one slice of cake. It doesn't really matter. But the drinking water is becoming a bigger and bigger problem because it's contaminated with a lot of chemicals and pesticides in, I would say, almost every country. I would actually think that Switzerland has some pretty clean drinking water the times I've been there. But I'm a little bit biased because I have not tested it. It just seems like such a clean country. But I'll say in Europe, in England and Denmark, where I test clients, and in the States, even though it lives up to the standard regulations, the problem is we only know things about acute toxicity. We don't understand when we drink the same water for decades and these small amounts of toxins begin to accumulate. That is what I'm seeing when I'm testing people. It's the ongoing accumulation, which is an issue. And we don't understand a lot about that. But when you test people, you can see that it's a problem because it's beginning to accumulate. And aside from that, there's been written so many articles lately that there are just uncontrolled spills from the industry that goes out into our drinking water. What many people don't know is that this is also an issue with our shower water. And this is where it gets a little bit annoying. And I also say, think about where you live, think about the issues you have, and then choose the things that are kind of most easy for you to do. No one is going to change everything just overnight. But again, for me, I would rather have cake every day than have my toxic being overfilled from drinking water, which is kind of boring, but it might be filled with toxins. And I can measure it, I can see it when I test the clients. but we're also absorb it through our skin. And that's what many people don't realize. So the shower water, we need to get both a filter on our drinking water and also our shower water if we want to avoid these sources of toxicity. Now, I know some of the researchers that I collaborate with, some of them are so fanatic that they'll actually travel with a shower filter that they will put into the hotel. I have to say, I haven't reached that level of fanaticism yet. Maybe it's kind of my bad because I don't realize it, but I'm testing my levels, and I would say it's a matter of accumulating through years. So I would still relax and keep things pretty simple when I'm traveling. But again, if you're the type who travels every day, yeah, I mean, it's at least maybe consider a travel filter for the drinking water, getting filtered water. But here's what we're looking at. This was a client who came to me with acute chemical toxicity. It can't even be on the lab testing. Look at the top, you're looking at 10,000. It doesn't even go till there. And these are typical chemicals, both the top and the bottom, that are present in contaminated drinking water. And she was coming in with digestive issues. And 6 months later, you're looking at the toxins, or this is quite acceptable, the range you're looking at. And these are in range, and it's quite acceptable. And her symptoms were gone. This took 6 months. Now, depending on what type of toxins we're talking about, it can take longer or shorter. But this was from her drinking water. And I don't think a lot of us realize that, again, digestive distress. It wasn't even what she was eating. Sure, it could make the symptoms worse, but that wasn't what was causing it. It wasn't like cake or gluten, even though it could aggravate it because her digestive system was already damaged, but it was from toxicity from her drinking water. I mean, that's kind of boring to get sick just from drinking water and showering in contaminated water. And we know that these toxins are super bad. I mean, the same toxins I just showed you, they are also excreted in the fumes that firefighters are exposed to, and they're 3 times as likely to die of cancer. So the question is, again, why are we not testing people when they get sick? Why do we not look into what is making them sick? At least what are major contributors? Because we know that these things are both toxic on so many levels and carcinogenic to some people, yeah, and so forth. When we're talking about chemicals and pesticides, most people think about food, and I want to show you this list because I really like it and it's super simple. And it basically means that yes, we do get pesticides from food, but if we stick to like the Clean 15, the pesticides content is pretty low in these. So stuff like already super expensive avocados and grapefruit, and yeah, you can all go down the list, and this is also free to download on the Environmental Working Group's website. And it shows you the dirty dozen, which you should always get organic because they're so filthy with pesticides. But tying into my point before is that the toxicity issue is not from food. When people get those high levels that you can actually measure in lab testing, it's not from food. But I'm not saying that it's not a good idea to eat organic mainly, because we do know that when you're eating pesticides, it does affect your microbiome. And that's never a great thing. So there is still absolutely reason, aside from direct toxicity issue, to eat mainly organic because it does affect your microbiome. I wouldn't be super hysterical. Again, make the change where you're going to see the biggest health effect. So eating out at a restaurant, I wouldn't really care if it's organic. Of course, I know some of you are eating out at restaurants all the time, not right now, unfortunately, but you're living that life. And yeah, then you would like to get also something like meat and dairy. You want to get that from organic sources because otherwise it's just like so contaminated with hormones. But generally speaking, I would really focus on what I do every day and make the change there, not when I'm out to eat a couple times a week. How do we treat chemical toxicity? Now, obviously, this is going to be a little bit generalized, and it's always going to vary depending on what else is going on with the client. But generally speaking, remove the source, get a water and shower system, infrared sauna therapy to really mobilize the sweat. You sweat out the toxins. Mobilize the toxins in the tissue with something called liposomal glutathione. It's not a binder, but it helps to push out the toxin. Increase the excretion with niacin, the flush version, and black pepper. That really helps the body to just move out the toxins. Again, if you have a damaged gut, you wouldn't take black pepper. If you have anxiety tendencies, you wouldn't take niacin because it can aggravate that. So, I mean, you want to take things based on what your practitioner says, but this is kind of just an example of how simple it can be done. And then you bind all the stuff up with activated charcoal or bentonite clay. Another major health threat, number 3, that is mold. And this is what made me pretty sick at the time. And we couldn't see it. A lot of people think they can see mold, but mold is completely hidden. It can be. Obviously, sometimes it's you can see it, but it can be completely hidden behind the wall. And that is also why I recommend, if you have a suspicion that you're living in an old house with some water damage going on, but you can't see it, I would always get a mold sniffing dog to do it, because I've had technicians out, but their equipment is not fine enough to figure out if there is hidden mold, because it can't pick up on the volatile oils and the mycotoxins that hidden mold releases. It can only pick up on the spores. So these dogs are just amazing. They're trained just like the police dogs, which sniff up drugs. They're trained to sniff the mold so they can show exactly where it is. Super smart. And just look at this list again of things that mold is tied to. POTS, you're seeing that stuff going on with the heart, the arrhythmia, asthma. And keep in mind that 25% of asthma cases are actually due to mold. Imagine being on an asthma inhalator for the rest of your life, and it was just because you got contaminated with mold, and that could have been removed from your body and you wouldn't have asthma anymore. So I'm really fond of that way of thinking, that we need to also, as clients, as humans, we need to ask our practitioner, why do I have this? Why do I have asthma? It's not enough just to be told, oh, here's an asthma inhalator, you should use this for the rest of your life, you have asthma. You want to know why, at least contributing causes, so you can do something about it. Estrogen dominance, low testosterone, again. So if you get tested for your hormones and you get told you have low testosterone, then you want to ask the question, why? Because otherwise you're never going to go upstream and treat the actual cause. You're going to get comfortable with just being like, okay, I have low testosterone, give me some testosterone cream I can rub on. And this is not a great way, even though in some cases it can be needed, but it's not a great way of treating something that might be caused by a completely different issue. So always ask why, until there are no more whys to ask. And what's interesting also is how all of these mycotoxins are produced by mold. They produce mycotoxins, and they affect our nervous system. So a lot of us are stuck in sympathetic overdrive. We have anxiety issues. We have difficulty sleeping. We might also have weight gain on our tummy. And these are all signs that our nervous system is stressed out. So of course there is the mental stress. That's absolutely important, and a different aspect I'm not going to go into because that's not my background, but nonetheless important to address. But imagine if your nervous system was stuck there due to a toxicity issue. I think that's kind of hello. This is a thermography showing how mold can affect. We tested her and she had a mold. She was diagnosed with mold toxicity. And we're seeing how this is affecting her breast tissue. On the left, you're seeing these inflammatory kind of patterns going into her breast tissue. And on the right, 6 months later, you're seeing that her breast tissue is looking completely normal. This is 6 months after we removed the mold. So it's just interesting to see how these toxins directly are impacting the body. And you can measure that there is a measurable outcome, which is improving. How do we treat mold? We like to use antifungals because we want to kill these molds because they're a living organism. So stuff like oregano is really helpful. Thyme, cinnamon, clove. And you can also put clove. I would never use oregano or cinnamon oil in this Nasaya oil, but you want to remember that you want to treat also the nostrils because you're inhaling the mold through your sinuses. You're inhaling the mold. That's how we get mold toxic. So it's really important to treat the sinuses. And ideally you would do this with a neti pot. That's kind of a thing where you cleanse the nostrils with salt water. And afterwards you'd put a couple of drops of, it could be clove oil or thyme oil or combination, in some sesame oil. And then just a couple of drops in each nostril to kill any spores that are inhabiting your sinuses. So that's a simple little trick to get rid of it in the sinuses, but you still need to treat the body by taking some of these antifungals. So we remove the mold source. Also think about if we're stuck at work, if there's mold there, we break down the biofilm with enzyme therapy because they do produce biofilm mold. We kill the colonization of the mold and we use antifungals for that. Wild oregano, grapefruit seed extract. And then we still want to mobilize the toxins, push them out of the tissue because toxins are stored in fat. It's really important to understand that our body likes to gain weight when we're toxic because it likes to protect us from the toxins. And it does that by kind of packing the toxins inside fat cells. So if we're really struggling with losing weight beyond what is reasonable, we might want to ask the question also, is it toxicity issue? Is it simply my body is trying to protect me from the toxins by packing it into fat? This is a common weight loss resistance issue. It's toxicity. And then we want to bind the mycotoxins with activated charcoal, bentonite clay, and glucomannan. Those are 3 really powerful binders. I think I just swallowed. Okay. So number 4 is mercury. And I talked a little bit about this before in the beginning, but mercury fillings is a huge issue for everyone over 40. And the mercury in your body doesn't get removed just because you have the fillings removed. So you want to get the fillings removed by a dentist who practices this specifically. And that means you're looking for a dentist who removes it by using vapor control and cofferdam. Both are needed for safe mercury removal. If you remove it without using those methods, you risk complete toxicity because they open it unsafely and the mercury goes out into the body. But in time, they will begin to deteriorate if you don't remove them. You chew on them and the mercury goes out into your body. And again, it can cause something like diabetes, also linked to depression, burning sensation in the body, neuropathy. So mercury is just really toxic. So any fillings you have, definitely get them removed by a good dentist. In Switzerland, my absolute favorite dentist is Dr. Hubert Litter. He is like the bomb. He just knows exactly what he's doing. He's very, very good. And people travel from all over the world to go to Dr. Hubert Litter. So I strongly recommend him for people who have any dental stuff they need to get done. And also keep in mind that this is a guy I tested. This guy had been in and out of the psychiatric ward. And he had a beautiful wife, beautiful kids, but he was depressed, angry, aggressive, and no one could understand why. And he had all the kind of insight from the going to various different psychiatrists and psychologists, but he just couldn't change the way he felt. And what's really interesting is that when we tested, he also had mold issues and other stuff, but mercury and lead, there's synergy to these heavy metals. And what do I mean by that? Well, they amplify the toxicity of each other. And this is very common for men. They have worked in a field typically where they're exposed to different chemicals, different heavy metals than most females are. So he had been doing something with lead. So he had become lead toxic and he had the mercury fillings. They did a study on rats where they had the amount of 1% of the rats who died from the amount of mercury. When they combined that same amount with 1% of the rats who died from lead, then all the rats died. So combining those two amounts, which only individually killed 1% of the rats, by combining it, they became so toxic, they amplified each other, that 100% of the rats died. And that's just crazy because it goes to show that we understand very little today about all of these environmental toxins and stuff going on today that we have not thoroughly tested. And maybe we understand one, but we don't understand the synergy. And that's really where the danger lies. And also, what I wanted to say about this guy's situation is that both mercury and lead is known to cause depression, aggressiveness. You don't like to be in the sunlight. I mean, a lot of psychiatric stuff going on, and it most likely just had to do with the heavy metals. He got off his antidepressants, but it took a lot of time. I mean, just because you test something, it's not like magic happens the next week or the next month. It's a long process to get it out of your body still. So it's not magical to get tested, but I still like it because then you know what you're working with and you can begin to understand that you're not crazy, but your biochemistry is. Again, another thing that's pretty common is mineral deficiencies, like I talked to earlier, and especially iodine. Iodine is also something that helps to protect us from heavy metals. So that's really a big thing, but you want to know if you're low in it rather than just taking large dosages of it. But stuff like seaweed, that's kind of safe. Obviously, you want it to get from, not contaminated sources. Seaweed can be contaminated, so you want to get it from Iceland or areas where that's proven to be free of contamination, which can be an issue when it comes from Asia. How do we treat heavy metals? We remove the source. Again, lead can both come from work, but it can also be old water pipes in the building. So if we have a suspicion that we're actually getting it from a water, then we need to consider the pipes. But again, get tested. Don't just change the pipes. I mean, that's kind of a big deal. But get tested so you know what your weaknesses are. Remove the dental fillings, get the deodorant, get the nonstick pans. Don't take painkillers too often because they are pretty high in, some of them can be a little bit high. So it's not meant for everyday use. Remineralize. Zinc, selenium, silica, iodine are the most common deficiencies, and mobilize to get them out of the tissue. Cilantro is really good for that. Infrared sonotherapy again. Bind it with chlorella. We want chlorella always taken together with cilantro because otherwise we're getting a little bit geeky here, but it has something to do with the stability on its own is not really great because it only has one thiol binding, one thiol. I'm forgetting the word in English, but you want to have two thiols, something called two thiols, for it to be a stable binder. And that happens when you're combining chlorella with cilantro. But another thing with chlorella is you want it sourced from closed glass tubes, not from the open things which it's often made in when it comes from Asia, because it gets contaminated when you make it that way. So you want to make sure it's made in closed glass tubes. And it will say so. Like a brand called Algomed and also Vitaviva, both of those brands, they make chlorella, which is sourced from closed glass tubes, so they're not contaminated. Then something like humic and fulvic acid, pectin, zeolite can also be great binders. DMSA, only use that if you're doing the Andy Cutler method. DMSA comes with a lot of side effects and a lot of trouble, so I really don't like using it at all, because the risk of distributing the heavy metals throughout the body to other organs, it's just too big. But I will reckon that the Andy Cutler method is an option, absolutely, if you want to go that route. Number 5 is, yeah, this is bread, but it's not bread. I don't have anything against bread. But what I do have against this is, if it's not organic, it is a source of glyphosate. And that's why a lot of us struggle with not being able to tolerate bread that much. It's not just the gluten. Gluten is a large, difficult to digest molecule. But if we can't digest gluten properly, it has more to do with that our gut is dysfunctional. But the glyphosate, which is present in non-organic bread, that's like Roundup, that is a very toxic chemical. And unfortunately, when I test people, I see glyphosate being moderately high in just about everyone. Bread is not the only source, but I would definitely make sure, if you struggle with bread, get it sourdough made, get it organic, get the old grains, not this Wonder Bread crap out there, which also has preservatives in it to keep bacteria from rotting the bread, but it also keeps your gut bacteria from properly digesting the breads. People usually don't realize that preservatives, they're actually also going to keep your own bacteria from digesting the bread properly. So fresh sourdough bread is the way to go. The other thing I want to mention is cow and pork. If it's not organic, they are sources of something called Clostridia. Clostridia is pretty toxic. It's a bacteria, and Clostridia it inhibits the body's ability to properly produce dopamine. Dopamine is the brain's battery, kind of. It's like your energizing neurotransmitter. And it's not just that, Clostridia is a pathogenic bacteria. So we really want to avoid that bacteria, also because we cannot kill it with heat. It is resistant to pasteurization. So even after we cook the meat, it's still there. So get your cow and pork organic. When we have all of these toxins we've just gone through, then we want to be aware that our body is going to be very prone to opportunistic infections, stuff like Epstein-Barr. And this is just a snapshot from literature of just how many different things, health issues that Epstein-Barr is connected to. Everything from gliomas to various cervical cancer, breast cancer. Epstein-Barr is estimated to be in at least 90% of us. This is a virus, and it is dormant if it doesn't have a virus-friendly environment. And what does that mean? If it doesn't have a lot of toxicity in the body, then it sleeps. And that's how we want it to stay. We want it to stay sleeping, because you cannot kill it. It's always there, but we want it to not become active, because it's some pretty nasty stuff. Ending off this webinar, we also want to remember, keep the drainage pathways open when we detox, because otherwise we're going to retoxify. And what are those drainage pathways? Those are, we don't want to be constipated. We want to sweat. We want to have the lymph system moving. So stuff like the rebounder, citrus fruits are really good for the lymph system. movement, lymph drainage, massage, and infrared sauna also helps to stimulate these pathways. So we're gonna end off just in a couple minutes, but I just want lastly to show you what most people look like, because some of you are going to be like, well, how should I be eating? And on that, I'll say, you want to realize that most people are low in protein. Most people are low in amino acids. This is just a regular lab test of a regular person eating a little bit of meat, nothing fanatical, but low on all the amino acids going down. And if you are lacking just one amino acid, then you cannot properly detoxify. So you don't want to be strict. I mean, you can be a vegan, but you really want to know where you're getting your protein from if you're being that much plant-based. Also, what I'm seeing in most of my clients are they have adrenal fatigue, and that means that they need regular meals to support their adrenals. They need there to be enough fat, enough salt, enough protein, and enough carbs. Intermittent fasting or extreme keto or extreme carnivore or extreme low-fat veganism, none of these extreme diets are great for people who are struggling with chronic diseases or are embarking on a detox journey, because most of them have adrenal fatigue stage 3. And that means that they have specific needs in order to support the adrenals, avoid burnout, support the cortisol production. And fasting is not going to be great for this person. Fasting is, I would say, for healthier people. So the Blue Zone diet, the Mediterranean diet, a little bit of meat, a little bit of dairy, mostly fermented, colorful, a lot of plants, but nothing fanatical. There is kind of room for everything here. That would be the ideal diet while you're detoxing, that has all the nutrients you need. So not too difficult to follow. So summing up the 8 steps in detox and what we talked about, mainly, I want to say identify your weakest link, which toxins affect you. Think about the 6 things we talked about and what could be linked to the symptoms you have. Stop the exposure, treat the opportunistic bacteria, virus, parasites. And if we're gonna want to get a little bit more geeky into it, we both want to focus on that we're removing the toxins from our water sites and from our fat storage sites. And different supplements relate to those different sites. And then make sure that the elimination routes are working. Sweat, urine, you're not constipated. And keep the drainage pathways open. Lemons, dry brushing, trampoline, hot cold therapy, lymph drainage massage. We want to keep that lymph system moving. And again, lastly, repair damage to gut from toxins, because toxins do damage the gut. They do need repair. So that is it for my presentation. I am just gonna go here and see what might be in, let's see here, the chat box. Yes, it will be recording. There will be a recording of this, someone is asking. Grazia, which food allergy test are you referring to? I would just, the Great Plains has a great food allergy test. I'm not a big fan of food allergy tests, but if you're doing the IgG food allergy testing with Great Plains, that's a good insight if you are hypersensitive to different types of food. Another one is asking, what test do you use for mineral deficiencies? Well, I mean, I'm not a big fan of the hair mineral analysis, but that's usually what's going to be recommended here. What I like to do is I like to use photospectrometry, and that is the same method that Dr. Klinghardt uses, and that they use if you go to some of the Swiss clinics that are pioneers in kind of biological medicine. Paracelsus, Swiss Mountain Clinic, they all use photospectrometry. And this is kind of a little thing that gets light through the skin, and then you have a density measure for the minerals in your skin. But if you don't have access to that method, hair mineral is decent, but it does have flaws. Like if you don't have enough of the mineral sulfur, then that can affect also when you're looking at the heavy metals, they're not being excreted into the hair. So it can kind of give you a fake result of what's actually going on. Regarding good filter systems for, Tina is asking good filter systems regarding water. I would recommend something with a chemical activated charcoal, a charcoal filter. I like Chanson, that is a Danish brand. It's not going to be suitable for where you live in Europe, but you're looking for a water filter system which has a charcoal component. I'm not big on osmosis, what do you call it, reverse osmosis right now, because I feel like we need a little bit more data on understanding if this is a good way to be drinking our water. Some people are saying, well, you can just put the minerals it removes back into the water, but I'm still hesitant to recommend that. So I have a list of things I have gotten into recommending for the last many years, and it's on my website. If you click on providers in the top bar menu, the first thing is going to be about other healthcare practitioners I recommend. But the last part of that side are recommendations on various stuff like water filters and what I recommend as health gadgets. So I would really go on that website just because I know we're going a little bit over time. So I want to kind of keep the time pretty tight here. So I'm just going to answer a couple more questions unless I get interrupted, and then that's going to be it. Are there other breads? Aiko asks if there are other breads other than sourdough that you recommend. What about the German pumpernickel breads? I would say any breads that are fresh, that are without preservatives. Again, because the preservatives inhibits the body from digesting the bread properly. And the old grains like spelt, Ezekiel bread, the sprouted breads. Yeah, that's really, those are all fine breads. Let's see here. Is Maximo asks if the fasting mimic diet by Dr. Valgo, Dr. Valsolongo is a good start for over 50 people. It depends. I mean, I would say the fasting mimicking diet is not really good if you suffer with stress or burnout, because you're going to push your body's ability to produce cortisol, and your adrenals already struggle with cortisol. What it does is when you fast, it does kind of push the bad cells to die, which is a good thing. But it also comes with the side effects of pushing the body to produce cortisol if it goes on for too long. So I would more do fasting for people who are a little bit closer to optimal health. If you have burnout, chronic health issues, I really wouldn't do fasting because it's going to push the body to produce too many stress hormones. Yep. I think that was it. Great. Awesome. So thank you guys. And if you have any questions, you can go to my website, ChristinaSantini.com. And I also have a newsletter there, signing up for Health Bits every month, which is free. I also have a new book out on Amazon where I wrote a chapter called The Successful Body. You can check that out. Super happy to see you. Bye.